Hey, in this video, you're going to discover how to sell your Amazon business. We're going to ask questions connected to this topic. We're going to answer these questions and hopefully help you with this topic of selling your Amazon business. And also you're going to have timestamps down in the description for each question. So it's going to be easier for you to navigate through this video. And today I'm accompanied by Yael Cabilly, who's the co-founder of one of the co-founders of Fortunet, which is an investment banking firm that specializes in helping sellers sell their business, their Amazon business. So Yael, welcome today. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about Fortunet. Good to have you here. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I love your videos, so pleasure to be here. So my name is Yael Cabilly. I'm a partner at Fortunet, one of the co-founders. Fortunet is an investment banking firm that helps mostly medium and large sellers selling their Amazon business. We start from the very beginning when they're just thinking about selling the business. We build the strategy, sometimes even a year before they actually sell it. We think about the right time to sell the business. We help them through all the stages, taxes, legal, getting organized for the sale. And then, of course, through the sale itself, finding a buyer, the due diligence, the entire process until the money, gets to their pockets. That's basically it.
Yeah, awesome. Nice to have you here today. So as I understand, your firm, investment banking firm, helps seller from literally step zero to step when they get their money to their bank account or any other way that happens. That's pretty awesome. So it's very interesting to me because I have a friend, actually two friends that sold their businesses, Amazon businesses this year. So one actually sold in early 21 recently, and one sold in 2020, and they got pretty big checks for it, which is pretty awesome. And so I'm interested in picking your brain, if it's possible, with the different questions that I kind of got for this topic, because it's pretty, there's a lot to ask, right? So may I ask you a few questions, Yael? And
sure, of course, go ahead.
Sellers. All right, so first one is, so why the heck would we want to even sell our business on Amazon?
It's actually a good question to start with, and I think it's very personal, and at the end it depends of the specific seller. I can tell you that from all the deals we've done, and the reason I always ask, it's part of the questions that the buyer asks as well. Why do you sell the business? The most common reason is, I've built something. That's what the seller tells himself. I built something. I got to, let's say, $5 million of revenue. I know that if I sell it, we'll talk about valuations, but let's say I get $4.5 million, okay, or $5 million. That's what I can get now. Or I can continue to sell on Amazon and then grow and then maybe sell it later. Now, I know I have it now. It's Amazon. A lot of buyers, a lot of sellers they know they have a good business, but they never trust Amazon and, completely. And at this point, they feel that they should just take the money and then do it again. They trust themselves that they can do it again. And what's interesting is, if we look at our clients, probably 98% of them are selling again on Amazon. They start again. And instead of 4 years, now it took them just a year and a half to get to the same point. So because they have the knowledge, the funds, because they just sold the business. So they're doing it faster, smarter. All the mistakes they've done, they don't do it on the second one. So I think that's the most common reason. By the way, it's not necessarily rational, right? Sometimes it's just being an Amazon seller is stressful, and you have this stress every day. I also deal with suspensions on my second company, and I know that the numbers of accounts that are, completely closed or going down, if it's a private label, that's a very low number. The risk isn't that high, but still, you got to a point, you can de-risk now, you can get the money and start over, or you can continue. So a lot of them at a certain point, and that point depends on the person, they say, okay, let's stop, let's start over and get what I deserve for what I did until now. Others are selling the business because of other reasons. I mean, there are two partners that do not want to continue working together. So the best way is just to sell the business and each one, continues on its own. And some of them are just lonely. So it's difficult to work alone every day on your accounts. So they want to go to something else. Some people want the money to invest in something else. But the reason that we see the most is There are buyers that can take it, and for them, it's deep pockets. They can take it and grow it, and for them the risk is different. I'm just one person, I have a family, let's sell it now and rebuild something and then sell it again. That's the common one.
Yeah, I understand. So there are various reasons where people get to a point where they're like, yeah, I'd rather make this nice exit now. And then, as you say, many of them actually get back to selling Amazon because they already know the process. And that's true. Yeah, you just can do it probably faster. Or some people just, for some reasons, they don't want to do it anymore at the Amazon, and they did build a good business, so they sell it. And for many reasons, there's a mentioned partnerships.
It's rare.
Most of them go back, you say? Yes, go back to selling?
Even those, there are those that who told us, we have a client who said, I want to play guitar. I cannot stand Amazon anymore. I do not sleep. I work 20 hours a day. And now like half a year later or a year later is back to Amazon.
It's a cool business model. I've been doing this for 4+ years and I still haven't sold the business. Not thinking of it too much now, like in terms of doing it now, but it is definitely as a thought that crosses my mind. Pretty cool. And and I have another question, which probably would be a bit popular, right? So what is the process of selling the business? So for example, I got to a point where I'm like, I don't play the guitar, but for example, I like computer games. And honestly, after I started Amazon, I dropped my playing time and I'm like, you know what? I want to get my character in World of Warcraft to level 120, I think it's now. And I want to get back to gaming. I want to sell my business. What is the process of selling?
So going quickly through the process, what you do is, first of all, we discuss the right time to sell. Is it now? Is it in 6 months? What have you launched recently? Are you about to launch something? We're going to look at all the circumstances and decide together when's the right time. Let's assume the right time is now. So the first stage is to prepare you for the sale. So we prepare the financial reports for the buyers, very organized, so that the buyers know exactly your income, your expenses, the net profit. And then we move on to preparing a kind of presentation about the business, like a kind of marketing deck that we would present to the buyers. Again, explaining all the advantages of the business, what a buyer could do with it, the competition, your advertising, everything related to this business. And once we have everything, we start the process. It looks like some kind of roadshow. So we send it to relevant buyers and the buyers review it. And then we do some kind of auction. So, they give an offer, another one gives an offer, and then we take the highest offer. In our firm, we did 3 rounds and we put a lot of emphasis on the structure of the business, because not all businesses are sold 100% cash and then, go home and continue. Very often there's, let's say, 80% cash, and then 20% is dependent on something. It's called earnout. It depends on the future sales, or sometimes it's 80% cash, and then 10% is you'll get the money, but just divided, through the year with interest. And then the last 10%, let's say, is a stabilization payment. You get it only if the account doesn't go down. So there are a lot of structures, and we deal a lot, we think a lot about the right structure for the particular account. For example, if you just launched a new product, so you want to profit from the profits of this new product, and if you're out, you won't get anything. So sometimes we would want, let's say, half of the profit for this particular product for a year, or we think a lot about the right structure for your particular deal. So as I said, and then we do an auction, we get the right price, the right deal that you feel comfortable with and the buyer feels comfortable with. Then we sign an LOI, a letter of intent, and then starts the due diligence process where they review, all your documents to make sure that the financial report you gave is accurate, to make sure that there's nothing, major there, severe black hat or things like that. Once the due diligence is over, you sign the final agreement. Money goes to escrow, you transfer the account to the buyer, and then the money goes from the escrow to your bank account. That's pretty much it. That's the process. And so initially a seller comes to you, he gets consulted, he gets explained about the process, and then you just follow him up through all the steps, essentially, right? Exactly.
And if they have any questions, they can ask, I believe, right? And then you
Exactly.
support them.
First step
Yeah.
is the strategy. When? That's very, very important, because at the end, you have one business usually. You want to maximize your value. So the first step is analyzing the account and thinking strategically when's the right time and how to do it and what's the best structure. Then we go through the process.
I understand. And for example, yeah, the other question is, so I'm a seller. I'm like, well, I have a business. I'm selling, but how do I calculate the business worth? Like, how would I calculate
The
it? Like,
value.
where should I start? Like, how do I do this?
Yeah. So usually, I mean, there's a certain formula that is used in our industries. The profit, the way it's calculated in our industry, the profit is called SDE. It's seller discretionary earning. The SDE, the way we calculate it is you take the revenue, your revenue for the last 12 months, okay, the LTM it's called, and then you retract all of Amazon's fees. You retract the advertising costs, PPC. You retract, of course, your cost of goods and shipping, and any expenses that are directly related to the business. For example, helium tank, whatever you're using, and that would be your profit. So usually it's not, it doesn't include the salary of the owner. Okay, so that do not retract that. So once you take this profit, okay, usually with private labels, it's between 20 to 30% of the revenue. You take that profit and then you apply a multiple to that profit. So for example, the multiple in our industry is between 3 and 5, depending on the business. So let's say you have a revenue of $5 million, okay? That's your revenue for the last 12 months. Your profit, we retracted all of Amazon's fees and the PPC and advertising outside of Amazon, the cost of goods and everything. We got to $1 million, okay? That's your profit. To that $1 million, you apply the multiple. Now, it's between 3 and 5 usually. For a business of $1 million, I can tell you that, it can go up to 4.5. It really depends of the kind of business, and it depends of many factors. How old is the account? Is it growing? Are all the products growing, or just part of them are going up? Are there good reviews? That's something, of course, they're looking at. And most of the buyers are looking for accounts that are easy to manage. So businesses that have 250 SKUs are more difficult to sell than businesses with 10 SKUs or 20 SKUs that generate $5 million. It's interesting because they have to manage a lot of accounts at the end. So they're looking for easy management. So as I said, you take the profit, you apply a multiple. It can be 3.5, it can be 4, it can be 5, depending on many factors. We can help you, trying to understand what's the specific value of your account, but that's basically it.
I understand. So, for example, when I'm calculating my business worth, can I use your help? Like, for example, I decided to sell and I'm like, yeah, I'm not too sure. Yeah, like what to do. Like, this is going to be a part of the kind of the process you take the seller through, I believe, as well.
Yeah, of
right?
course,
Okay,
of course. The first discussion is how much you're worth, more or less. I always say you're worth what buyers are willing to pay for your business. And that's why, the process that I describe is very important. If you prepared it for sale, if you sold it at the right time, if you went through the preparation of a marketing deck about your account, if you showed it to all the buyers in the industry, not one, not two, but all the buyers, then you know that you got the right price for your business. If everybody was looking at it and there was an auction between them, that's the maximum price you could get. So we can evaluate and tell you what we think, you could get for the business, but sometimes we're surprised positively. There are accounts that we thought, so this business is worth, let's say 3.6 because it's flat, not growing, and then we got 4.3 multiple on the profit. Okay. So sometimes we're surprised, but in most cases we know more or less where it could go.
Interesting. And Yael, and for example, I'm like, yeah, I want to sell my business. I understand. I'm like, I want to sell it for more. Like, most of us would like to sell it, say, for not for 1 million, but 1.2 million. How can I increase the value of my business?
let's say we're talking about your account, right? After this call, you're going to call me and say, listen, I'm thinking about it now. I probably want to sell by the end of 2021. And then we're thinking, okay, what can we do to increase the value, right? What can you do during that year so that you'll get the maximum price? During that time, a lot of sellers ask us, should I start selling on Shopify to take the multiple up? I heard that Shopify accounts have better multiples. Should I go to retail? A lot of ideas. I always tell clients, do what you do best. Okay. If you're very good at Amazon, if you're very good at launching new products, then do that. If you're very good at, I don't know, launching variations to existing product, do that. If you're very good at starting new platforms on Amazon, like Europe, Canada, Mexico, then do that. Starting, during that 1 year that you have, starting something completely new that you have, no experience in it, for example, retail, that's a little risky unless it's not you. Okay. So if you're focusing on Amazon and there's someone else, I don't know, a new partner that helps you growing that and it doesn't affect your account, that's okay. But if you're going to focus on something else and your account will start to go down or just not grow, that's not good. So just remember, at the end, you get a multiple on your profit, whether it's through Shopify or whether it's through Walmart. So just focus on what you know and do what you do best so that you'll have the highest possible profit. At the end, that's what it's about.
I understand. So in order to increase the value, we should concentrate on something that kind of already works and maybe not jump into new fields because we might feel like, I want to sell it for more. Let's do this and that and that. And then let's create a Shopify website. Let's create a Facebook group. Let's create a community, which is pretty cool. Yeah, if you can do that, that probably will help you. However, if you are not experienced and suddenly, you're going to be fulfilling orders through Amazon on Shopify or something, and you will have late shipments. I don't know, whatever. So, okay, so I understand. So just to do things that potentially focus on whatever's kind of working and try to improve. This way, the value will go up. And interesting.
Exactly.
So that's pretty cool.
And by the way, just by starting the process, sometimes you understand things about your account. We hear from many sellers once they get the P&L, the profit and loss report, and they see all the numbers. Sometimes, like we had a case, for example, where it was a large seller and the profit that he had was 18%. And now we felt it's a category that we usually see higher profits, 25%, 30%. We sat with the seller, one of my partner is an ex-Amazon seller, very knowledgeable. So he sat with him and he said, listen, something's wrong with the PPC. You're spending a lot. Let's see if we can do something there. And then they sat for 3 days and they eventually changed the PPC strategy a bit. The profit went up from 18% to 25% just by this small change. And not because my partner is a genius, although he is, but it's because, we're seeing the best accounts every day. We're dealing with medium and large businesses on Amazon. So we're seeing, all the best strategies. And when something is wrong, it immediately comes out of the P&L. Not always, some businesses are very optimized and we just say, continue what you were doing. But in many cases, we say, what's going on with your trademark there? Why is it registered only in the UK and not in the US? Let's do it now. We need to do it now before we start the process. Or, a lot of eyes on your business so that you know what you're doing and you can maximize the value. That's the real goal.
Very cool. Interesting point that once we start the process, we can find new potential places where we can improve the value of the business kind of thing, right?
Exactly.
Interesting. And I wonder, so we want to sell the business, we kind of go through the process, but who buys it? Who are the people that want to buy businesses on Amazon? Like, why would they do that?
Right.
Who are they?
Why would they buy a business? So there are a lot of different types of buyers. The last year has been very interesting. There are more and more buyers in the industry. So there are several types. There are e-commerce companies or large Amazon businesses that are looking to expand to other categories or just expand their own business. There are companies like Thracios that are aggregating, we call them aggregators. They're buying many brands, they raised money in order to buy brands. So there are these type of companies. There are VCs. In the last years, we've seen private equities that work with agencies and purchase brands directly. In the last year, we've seen new players coming in, because especially since COVID, players that were in retail trying to buy online businesses. Very interesting to see. The buyers are growing every day, and I think it's going to continue to grow, and at least until the end of the year.
Yeah, people see a lot of potential in Amazon businesses, in the growth of Amazon, I guess, and they see the pattern of selling on Amazon. So I guess they see different businesses, they take them, and usually they buy it in order to obviously make more profits with it. Yes, they see how maybe they have the teams behind this, so they buy a business. They're like, okay, we see this business that's already crushing it, right? They usually want to buy something that works already, right? And then they're like, yeah, we can even make it better. So, and different types of buyers do that. Yeah.
It's a very, it's cliche to say win-win, right? But we feel that, it's really a win-win here. When you look at this from the buyer perspective, in most cases, you can grow the business, just like you said, because they can take the business just by starting, taking a US business and taking it to Europe and Canada. And just by that they can grow the business. You get the reviews, right? You start right away, you get the reviews in Canada. So that's one way to grow it. Most of the buyers promise to their investors that they'll grow it by 30-40%. So they are looking for businesses that they could potentially grow. But even if you don't grow the business, right? Just think of from the buyer perspective. You buy an account of $5 million revenue. You bought it, let's say, for $5 million, right? The yearly profit is $1 million. Okay, just keep it for 2-3 years. You have that profit for these 3 years. You sell it. Usually, we see that the multiples have gone up, so you'll sell it even for more. So from a buyer perspective, it's an amazing investment, even without growing it. But most of the buyers do grow the business, whether it's something they've done or just the industry that has grown.
I understand. Okay, so as you mentioned, it's something that grows. There's more interest in Amazon businesses, and more people buy, more people sell. It's going up. It's pretty nice.
Yeah.
And for example, you got into a level where you're like, well, it's kind of selling. You're like the process got to a place where it has to be transferred. How does this happen? How does it get transferred? How can you transfer an Amazon business from a person to another?
Right. So you have two options. The buyer can just take the listings and operate them from his account or from her account, just, adding yourself to the listing, just like a hijacker. You come from another account, you add yourself to the listing, and then the seller, sells out the goods. And when you finish the inventory, they continue from the other account. So that's one way of doing it. Another way is to transfer the account, really do a transfer of ownership in the seller's account. So you need to ask Amazon's permission to do that. And only if they agree, you can do that. So you ask for the permission, and once they do, you transfer everything. You change the legal entity, the bank account, the credit card, phone number, everything from the seller to the buyer.
So it's a legal process. Yes, Amazon is aware of it. Obviously, the buyer and the seller are aware of it. And then in different ways, such as you mentioned, like connecting with another kind of seller, with another seller on Amazon to another listing, like kind of a hijacker, you can just take kind of control of that listing and sell on it as you were just the one who created or something.
Yeah,
I understand.
Not really like a hijacker.
Just not like I see. I understand
adding another seller on the listing.
Just another seller, not as these hijackers that we, it's just not connected. But it seems like the amount of hijackers on the Amazon listings got down with the years. I remember in 2017, like we got like every 2 days, boom, 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 new. It was it was pretty horrible actually. Good word.
Yeah.
But now it's when you get red registry as well, it's much easier, right?
Yeah.
Right? And so okay, so that's how the transfer happens. And how long does this process take?
So preparing the business for sale, if you're deciding to sell now, preparing it for sale is about a month, 2 weeks to a month. And then you start the process. And when you start the process, signing an LOI, like getting the offers and getting to the right price takes about 2 weeks to a month. And then you sign the LOI. There's the legal part that takes about a month and a half, 2 months. So the entire process, if you look at it, it's about 4 months in general, sometimes 5. If it's a very large business, sometimes 6 months. Yeah, between 4 to 6 months. Some
Right.
are,
So
of course, less, but the smaller ones can be less.
I understand. And how do we get paid? I think you mentioned that in the beginning, but for example, can you say it again? How do we, I think that's a question that kind of
Right.
interests many people. How do we get the money transferred? How do we
Show
get
me the
paid?
money.
Yeah, that's makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So how do you get paid? So as I said, I mean, the buyer won't transfer the money until they get the assets, right? And the seller will not transfer the assets until he knows the money is promised. So once you sign the contract, money goes from the buyer to an escrow service, usually an escrow agent. The money stays at the escrow agent, and then we transfer the account from the seller to the buyer. The account, the trademark, all the assets that need to be transferred are transferred. And then once we finish the transfer, the money goes from the escrow agent to the seller. That's basically the process.
Yeah, what is escrow?
Escrow is, it's usually an organization, either a lawyer or whatever, that saves the money during that time. To that the money is not at the buyer and it doesn't depend on the buyer anymore. So once the assets are transferred, you know that the money will go to your bank account as a seller.
Understand. And yeah, what about the age of a business? For example, maybe I'm a new seller, or maybe I'm an experienced seller, and suddenly I start a business, and I get to crazy amounts of revenue and profits in, say, 2 months. I know what I'm doing, and boom, in 2 months I'm already profiting big amounts. But what should be the minimum age, perhaps, of selling a business, or is there such?
Yes. So there's no minimum, but let's say that at 6 months, probably it will be difficult to sell the business. 1 year is becoming easier, but the more, older the account is, the higher the multiple. The multiple takes into account the stability of the business, because, when a buyer evaluates an account, they try to understand what the risk is, right? If it's a business of 5 years, you can see how the business is growing, and you can see an history. When it's a new account, you're taking a risk. So everything is sellable. It's just they're taking into consideration the age when evaluating the business. Try not to sell it on the first year, I guess. Will be easier after a year.
Yeah, of course, because then people can see, say, how it was operating through Christmas. We can see the
Right.
Christmas sales, for example.
Yeah.
And then if you have 2 years of Christmas sales and you have three, or just
Exactly. You
summer
want
sales, for example.
some history.
Some history, yeah. The more history you have, probably the easier it's going to be to sell it, or the harder if it's not a good history, right?
Yeah.
Which also makes sense. I see.
Exactly.
And yeah, another thing is, maybe I'm a seller. I'm thinking of selling my business, and suddenly, out of the blue, I get an email. Hey, we want to buy your business. Like, somebody approaches us and asks us to sell our business.
Yeah.
Is this legit? What is this?
So some companies, of course, are extremely legit. You want to ask yourself what you want to achieve. I'm a believer in processes. When you see one buyer or two buyers, you get one offer or two offers. You can try to negotiate, but until a certain point. If you see all the buyers of the industry, if you see hundreds of buyers, you can get dozens of offers, and then you can play with them and you can negotiate much better and usually get to a higher price. That's one of the things that you should take into consideration when you sell directly to a buyer. The second thing is, so most of the sellers, they don't know how to prepare financial reports, and they kind of let, when they're selling directly, they let the buyer kind of telling them their story and preparing for them the P&L. So in some cases, it's absolutely fine. And in some cases, we've seen cases where the buyer obviously included a lot of expenses there. And think of it as each dollar is $4 or $5, or, depending on your specific multiple. So you should be very careful when looking at your financials. You should be sure that it's done correctly. In some cases, you can even do some adjustments. So one of the things we do, there's a lot of thinking around the P&L. The profit and loss report, we always say it's the first part of the negotiation. Sometimes there's an adjustment that must be done for, let's say you've been using air freight only because you weren't organized enough and you didn't have the funds. That's not something that the buyer will do. Probably the first thing that they'll do is to change that. So in some cases, we came to the buyer and said, this is 100K that he lost here, but in your case, it's not going to happen. So we would like to, retract that. So every dollar is $4 or $5. So sometimes you can adjust the P&L or at least negotiate or make an argument that this shouldn't be included. So very important to think about that, especially if you're selling directly. Medium and large businesses are usually doing those processes and they get consulting. Smaller businesses can sometimes, sell directly.
Okay, so if we are not to sell directly, say, where can we sell the business? Where can we look for places to sell our business, or if we're not selling directly?
Selling directly, so you're speaking directly with the buyer. If not, then either go through a broker, or if they're larger, they'll take an investment banking firm, or they get consulting, separate consulting, whatever you take, and that's separate from Fortunet. I'm saying whoever you are and whatever you do, try to know the process before you take actions, because it's usually a lifetime event. I mean, for most guys, it's a big thing. It's not $100 million transaction in most cases, but still it's a lifetime event. So you need to know what you're doing. So either through consulting, either through an investment banking firm, or if you're smaller, through brokers, that's also doable. Whatever works for you. That's what I believe. I think the most important is knowledge. Being knowledgeable about this event. That's pretty much it.
I gotta tell that down description of the video, I'm gonna leave Yael's contacts, so you can contact her. If you let her know that you came through this video, you can get like a free, as you mentioned, kind of evaluation, Yael, of the business. And this can help you to see where you're standing. And again, if you're thinking of selling, this might be helpful to you to kind of be the first step in this process. So Yael, unless you have any other things that you want to touch connected to this, I have a special question for you or something like that. Do you want to share anything else? Maybe you forgot something. I don't know. I think we covered a lot, but
no, I think you did a lot of good questions.
Yes, cool. Thank you for this. So the last one is actually not a question. I want to ask you, what can you wish to us? Just because it's 2021 now starting, right? Maybe you have some wishes to my friends here on YouTube that are watching, and for a good year or something.
I hope so. Yeah. So while I hope that COVID will fade away and we'll be done with it, on the other hand, on the e-commerce, I wish sellers to have the same results they had this year without COVID. COVID has affected, a lot of businesses went up. There are reports showing that e-commerce went 10 years ahead. So I just wish that it will continue that way, and people who kind of discovered e-commerce, they were buying retail and they now buy online. I hope they'll continue to do it so that our e-commerce community will benefit from that and can help them as well. So that's my wishes for 2021.
Thank you, Yael. Appreciate that. And as I mentioned, I'm going to have Yael's contacts down in the description for people to contact Yael if you want. And Yael, thank you today for coming. I appreciate your time. It was really fun. I learned a lot, and hopefully the viewers as well. And maybe we can do more videos in the future,
Sure. Looking forward. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.